Morning, everybody. Welcome to week 8. I hope everyone is washing their hands with generous amounts of soap. So let's go ahead and hop into this week and see what we got in store here. So first off, we'll go to content and we will look at our course schedule, because I think there's some pretty important things to recognize this week. So week 8 is where we're going to be looking at lighting, UVs, and textures. And this is a section of the class that is sometimes really difficult for some people. So make sure you're giving yourself lots of time to work on this. Next week for ETSU students is spring break. Now I realize that may not coincide with your high school if you were doing this as dual enrollment, but I think that how we're going to do this is to kind of combine these 3 weeks in terms of work that you'll be doing. So if you don't finish with the texturing this week, you may be able to find some extra time next week to during spring break to be doing your texturing. We're not going to have anything due during spring break, so don't worry about that. Vice versa, if this week is your spring break or week 9 is your spring break, then maybe you'll be using next week to be doing the work from those 2 weeks. So just kind of check ahead. If for some reason you're on spring break and that's going to cause difficulties on when you can post to the discussions, let me know and I can make some subtle shifts to that to help out. After we come back from spring break, we're going to jump straight into some animation, and we're going to have 3 weeks where we are this is incorrect, kind of. I just realized this. So Project 2 Breakfast is actually due at the end of week 11, not week 12. So it's the Sunday of week 11. So I will adjust that. I want to make sure, but I believe that that's true. So after spring break, we're going to create some rigging for our spoon. We're going to animate the spoon jumping, and then we're going to simulate the cereal, and it will be due at the end of that week, on Sunday of that week. And then at that point, we'll jump into our final project, which we'll talk about more later. So let me go back to our content and double check and make sure I am correct. Yeah, week 11. Yeah, that's where project 2 is set up for the submission. So let me go ahead and change that in our course info just so we have the correct date on that. And the issue with how this works is that for the people who are taking this class live, it's actually due like the first day of class of week 12 because they don't have class on Sunday. So that's where that got a little confused. Okay, so back to week 8, which is this week. So let's look at what we're kind of going over here this week. We're going to talk a little bit about how to get some really nice looking lighting using images that already have lighting information in them. We're going to talk a little bit about Arnold materials. We'll go a little deeper into that. I know in previous classes we talked about materials, but we're just going to dive a little deeper in how we can get something that looks really nice in our render. We're going to talk about UVs and what UVs are, what they're about, what that even means. But the shortcut answer to that is this is how we're going to get our textures to wrap around our objects. And so for the rest of this class, we'll also be doing texturing of our cereal box, and then we'll talk about how to take those UVs into something like Photoshop or Photopea, which is the free version of Photoshop Online, and then how to eventually bring that back into Arnold, and then how to optimize some of your renders so you can get a slightly faster render time. So we're going over a lot this week. Keep in mind, rendering is one of those things that takes a little bit of time. And for this week, for this project, I'm going to strongly encourage you to render in Arnold It just looks so much better when you do. On top of those lessons, you'll also notice that we have these cereal box textures. So this is just a link to a whole bunch of textured images that you can download, and if you look at them, you'll see that they are actually parts of cereal boxes that I've scanned in. And so with that, let me find the front so you can see it better. Yeah, so with that, you can use these images to texture your cereal box, and so you'll see that more in the video as we work through it. The other thing that we'll see is the Photopea, which is an online raster image editor. It's very similar to Photoshop and has all the tools that we'll need for this. So if you happen to have a PSD file or a Photoshop installation on your computer, you're welcome to use Photoshop. This is sort of the free alternative that we can use for this class. And then finally, the things that are due this week. I kind of went a little light on the discussion. So for week 8, all I'm really wanting is a retrospective. There's no responses necessary for this. I want you to just look back and tell us something you've really enjoyed about learning how to animate in Maya and something that you really hated about learning to animate in Maya. For some of you, there may be more things you enjoyed than hated, and for some of you, there may be more things that you hated than enjoyed. But for the most part, I just want you, still the graph editor. So for the most part, I just want you to kind of look at this and just sort of think about, where you're struggling, where you're doing well, what you're enjoying, and is this the stuff that you are enjoying, right? You don't want to do something for the rest of your life as a career if you're not enjoying it. So the other thing to look at is, of course, we got the option to turn in some revisions. You'll see that from the previous submissions, I've already graded everything that was in there as of 3/2/20. I see a couple of things that people have resubmitted there, and so I'll look at those very soon. Okay, so let's go back to our table of contents, actually. So week 8 is this week. Next week is spring break, and so I'm not counting that week because when we arrange this class, some days spring break is here, some days or some semesters it's a week early, some semesters fall break shifts it around and stuff. So I'm just not counting those in that one as our 15 weeks. And so next week you have nothing necessary. I have a spring break page here that basically says this is your spring break. Have a great week. Maybe use this time to catch up. I do still have an option if you wanted to submit any revisions for that week, though. So if you're needing a link to that, it'll still go to the same place. And just so we can kind of look ahead a little bit of what we're going to be doing after spring break. So maybe you finish up with week 8, but you don't have anything to do over spring break, and you're just wanting to get ahead. Week 9 is where we're going to start creating our deformers for our spoon. So we're going to start creating manipulators and deformations that allow us to change the way our spoon and other objects will deform. We also have some other stuff in week 9. I guess we don't. I was thinking that we had. Oh yeah. So that's the biggest thing that we're getting into to week 9, and that's a pretty. It's just one video lesson. It may seem small, but that's actually pretty intensive. And so we talk about deformation a little bit as our discussion as well. So feel free to look ahead and even work ahead a little bit to try to get ahead if you would like. Okay. The other thing I want to talk about really briefly is I've submitted the early semester progress reports, which is basically your grade to this point. That grade should reflect whatever is in the current grade book. So if you were to go to A to Z and go to grades. Now I'll not do that because it'll show everybody's grades. I believe that that's how you get to it as well. But once you go to your grades, you'll be able to see what grades you had on each thing. Now we've kind of talked about this, but like with week 3 where we turned in, let's look at our rubric. So the rubric for each of these projects will look something like this. And what you may have seen is something like, I have a 1 in the, let's say, in the animation section, but everything else I have 4s in, right? This is how you can learn how to, or this is how you can see how to improve, right? The entire point of this is to show you where the project is falling short and where the project needs to be improved. And for the most part, I probably gave you notes on those. If they're unclear, feel free to contact me and I can give you more information. But this is your roadmap on how to turn any grade into an A. So if you have a 50 on one of your projects, or you have like 10 points out of 25 or something, you should be able to look at this rubric and use this as your to-do list of what you need to work on. The lighting and rendering didn't look good. Let me work on lighting and rendering for a little while and improve that. And if that's down here at like a 1 or a 2, then maybe you can bump that up to a 3 or a 4, right? And that way you're able to put extra effort into the project and improve your grade, right? So I just wanted to remind you of that. That's what the revisions folder is for, is you've gone back, you've looked at this, you've made changes to that project. I'll accept those changes, or I'll accept any revisions for this class all the way up to the last day of class. For us, that is Thursday of week 15. Okay. And the reason it's Thursday is because basically we have to have the grades in by a certain time, and so if I gave you all the way till Sunday night, I would have like 4 hours to do all the grading and get it submitted to the school or something like that. So it's really not, it's really just so I have enough time to make sure I get the grades in, and then if you have any questions about the grades, or you're like, wait, I thought I turned that in, you can let me know before I submit them to the school, or even after I've submitted them to the school, so I can make changes to that if I just overlooked something. The other reason is just to kind of make it equitable with the rest of the classes. Is on ground, all of the classes are pretty much finished by Thursday as well, and so it just seems like it's kind of evens out that way. So. Again, if you have any questions, even through spring break, I'll still have access to my computer. Feel free to send me emails. I'm not always the fastest to reply to emails, but I'll usually get to it within a day. Also, I had mentioned a couple weeks ago in the news that Amy Ka, who is one of the tutors in the digital media department, has agreed to set up a Discord account for you all, and so there's the link if you want to add her, and she can give you some feedback as well. She's a really great tutor. If you happen to be on campus, you can also meet with the tutors in person. I think I posted their work schedule. Yeah. Dustin is on Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday from 7 p.m. to 8 or 10:30 p.m. and Amy is on Tuesday and Thursday from 8 to 10 p.m. And so you would have access to the labs. You could just go in and talk with them. They could help you work through the projects you're having. So, okay, hopefully that's helpful. Let me know again if you have any questions along the way. And yeah, have a great spring break. Bye-bye.